Welcome back to Food for Tomorrow.
I was used to that introduction. How was summer camp there for a couple hours? Huh? It was pretty great. We may have lost a few people out in the fields, but they'll come back. So the next few segments here focus on how the food and agricultural sectors, as we call them, have been disrupted. And so to begin our afternoon plenary, I'd like to welcome to the stage Ms. Stephanie Strom and Mr. Steve Case. Enjoy, guys.
So, hello everyone. We're going to try to keep you awake for a bit. I know you've just had lunch, but hopefully you had a cup of coffee. And I'm sure.
And thanks for coming in. I was outside wandering around. I almost didn't come back.
So I'm sure some of you may be sitting here saying, why are they interviewing a tech entrepreneur for a food conference? But Steve actually has a lot of investments in food. And so maybe you could start out by just telling us about the investments that you've made so far in food businesses.
Sure.
Well,
first I'd set it up and say that even AOL, when we started 30 years ago, obviously it was a tech business, but what was driving it, at least what I was passionate about, was the idea of the internet, how you can use the internet as a way to kind of level the playing field, give everybody a voice, not just a few television networks, a few newspapers, and it was more the idea of the internet, even though tech enabled it. When we got started now 30 years ago this summer, only 3% of people were online, and we said someday everybody will get online. And so the revolution of communications, media, took a while, but that was really driven by the idea of the world would be a better place if this internet existed, then it was ubiquitous and it was affordable and accessible and so forth. So with food or some of the other sectors, health and education and transportation, other things that we've invested in, we're looking for great entrepreneurs building what we think can be great companies that really can have a broad impact. And our mission statement for Revolution is actually the same as for the Case Foundation, which is we invest in people and ideas that can change the world. And we think there needs to be a revolution in food. Obviously, the fact you're here, you believe it, so we're kind of preaching to the converted. And we think entrepreneurs bringing a disruptive approach to things are the way to put pressure on the incumbents. And so we do believe there will be kind of a lot of change, a lot of disruption in all factors, all segments, all sectors of this. And we made a few initial investments. Sweet Green, we're the largest investor in Sweet Green. You heard from Nick yesterday. We believe that can become an iconic brand, already is in some cities, and usher in a better way to eat healthier options in a way that feels great. Not just feels like it's something you're supposed to do, but something you want to do. And what they're trying to do around that, we think, is terrific. There's sort of a sense of community around it. We've also invested in Revolution Foods, which is a leader in school lunch, kind of healthier school lunch business. They now do 1.5 million meals a week, growing quite rapidly.
How many states are they in?
I think it's 17 or 18 states now. It started by two moms 8-9 years ago who just said, "This is crazy. We're not, our kids should be eating healthier." And right now the big food, the industrial food complex, whatever you want to talk about, is not providing healthy options, and that actually impacts learning in the afternoons. And, there's a lot of studies that kind of prove that. And of course, if we have a healthcare crisis where 1/6 of our economy is healthcare, and it's really more of a sick care system, not a wellness system, what better way to kind of get people on the right track and kind of give them healthier options when they're young? And so it's great in the short run in terms of helping give people more nutritious meals so they actually can learn more, but it also is critically important if we're ever going to get in front of what is now a really significant kind of healthcare problem. So it's those kind of businesses that we are backing, that we believe can be significant, profitable, valuable businesses, and therefore generate a return for us as an investor, but also have an impact, a purpose, what some call impact investing, that really can kind of have a broader impact, and then put pressure on the incumbents so that they actually over time will change as well.
So tell us a little bit about how you find these companies. Tell us about the bus tour, for instance. You've been doing
of the media attention and most of the investor attention is in California, New York, and Massachusetts. Last year, 75% of venture capital went to those 3 states. But they're actually great entrepreneurs building great companies in the other 47 states. And so the Rise the Rest is designed to shine a spotlight on that. We did the first one a year and a half ago. We went to Detroit and Pittsburgh and Cincinnati and Nashville. And the second one we did Madison, Minneapolis, Des Moines, Kansas City, St. Louis. And then this spring we did Richmond, Raleigh-Durham, Charleston, Atlanta, New Orleans. And just a few weeks ago we did Baltimore, Philadelphia, Buffalo, Manchester, and Portland. 19 great American cities with great histories, but we think also great futures, in part because of what's happening with entrepreneurs. And it's a broad kind of focus. It's not just on food, but in, I think every city we met some foodpreneurs who were doing some interesting things. I remember there was in Minneapolis something called the Global Market that was basically a marketplace that was inviting people, particularly people in the neighborhood, and it was a challenged neighborhood to give them a chance to start a business. And some of those are turning out to be scaling and creating pretty significant kind of businesses. I remember there was a kind of a sushi chain in Ohio that was expanding with an interesting twist. And Portland recently met with Luke of Luke's Lobster. Started 5-6 years ago. He was sort of a frustrated Wall Street type, and said, my real passion is lobster, and he, now he's got a pretty significant business that's growing rapidly. In Richmond, there is a company called Health Warrior that was doing kind of healthier kind of snacks. So we're seeing this all across the country. And my belief is, and my hope, and my expectation actually, is that the next generation of great entrepreneurs, while many will be in San Francisco, many will be in New York, many will be in Boston, far more will be all across the country. And that's particularly true in sectors like food and agriculture, where there's not necessarily the same kind of built-in kind of network effect around technology, for example, that exists in Silicon Valley. So I think we need to kind of level the playing field, make sure anybody who has an idea anywhere, and also, by the way, the other little problem right now is that it's not just that most of the venture capital goes to those 3 states. Most of the venture capital also goes to white guys like me. And so how do you create a more inclusive platform around entrepreneurship and do that across sectors that really need to be disrupted? Not just food, but learning and health and other things really need a fresh perspective. And my belief in this next wave, what I've called the third wave of the internet, is going to really tackle some of these challenges that are, and many of those great entrepreneurs are going to be in these rise of the rest regions. And
are you actually handing out money on these bus tours, or does that?
Yeah, we do have a pitch competition in each city. I do write a $100,000 check to the winner of the pitch competition in each city, but that actually is designed more to create a opportunity to talk about what's happening in the city and to get attention both within the city and outside of the city. Most of what really we're trying to do is we spend get up at 7 in the morning and then work till 10 or 11 at night, and we're driving around on a bus in these cities, but trying to get entrepreneurs meeting some of the corporate CEOs, trying to get the mayors, the governors understanding what's happening in these entrepreneurial communities, so they could be more supportive, engage the universities. It's a little bit like a rolling meetup, or in a kind of a mashup of different ideas and different perspectives. So that's really what we're trying to do. And it's actually surprising to me that in some of these cities there are great things happening, but a lot of people in those cities don't know about the other things that are happening. And that's particularly true in terms of inclusive entrepreneurship, that we're trying to make sure people are supportive of the broader landscape of what's happening and are at least aware of it, and try to build some connections and hopefully some partnerships that really can lift these regions to the next level.
So now you've made investments, I think, in 4 companies in total. Is that right? The 4 or 5 companies, but there are other guys that we tend to think of as tech investors, right, who have started making investments in food as well. Vinod Khosla has made some investments. Bill Gates has invested along with him and by himself. I think even Mark Andreessen has made some investments, right? So what's the interest in food? And do they think of it in the same way that the people here think of food? Or are they thinking of it in a different way?
Well, it's hard to say, because I don't know, everybody's view here, and I don't know their views in a complete way. But I think it's a mix of recognizing that it's a big industry, a $5 trillion industry, that is, kind of the status quo is the status quo, and it's not great. And there are opportunities for entrepreneurs to build new kinds of companies that offer new kinds of products and services to an audience that that wants it, particularly kind of younger people. There's clearly a generational shift, and so therefore it creates opportunity. That's one aspect. I think they, as do I, like taking on incumbents. The entrepreneurs essentially are attackers, and the entrenched interests, the Fortune 500 companies, are essentially the defenders, and the battle is between the attackers and the defenders. And I think
food is war.
People want to basically be on the kind of not to disrupt for the sake of disrupting, to sort of in a way that's like, my mom once said like 20 years ago, why do you use the word disruption? It seems sort of like you're trying to break something. And in some ways you are, but actually what you're really trying to do is shine a spotlight on a better path forward that results in not just interesting companies that end up being valuable and good investments and so forth, but also actually do change the landscape in a way that's more positive. They said that was why we were passionate about AOL and the internet. That's why we're equally passionate about this food revolution. I think it's time for it to happen. I think some of the efforts, including a lot of people in this room, some of the pioneers, 20 years ago, I think some of the companies like a Whole Foods or Starbucks or Chipotle or others really kind of set the stage, made it clear that there were opportunities to build big businesses. Those three companies alone are worth collectively over $100 billion.
Right.
Well, if you're an investor, you say, well, that's pretty valuable. And investors also look at what they call total addressable market, or TAM. 100%. Everybody eats food. In this country, apparently everybody eats food not 3 times a day, which I thought 4.7 times a day. That's a big opportunity. And to the extent the general themes around fast casual eating into fast food, it's happening. The big trends, which partly are interested in Sweetgreen, around both healthier options in fast casual and the use of technology. The smartphones are becoming a real game changer in that sector as well. My guess is in 3 or 4 years, more than half of the orders at Sweetgreen will be on smartphones, and people order it when they're walking there or walk in. It's already made for them, but fresh and customized. The payment information is stored so they can walk out. So if they want to sit down and have that experience, great. But if they really want to, kind of not just grab and go at like a market, which is sort of something that's just been probably sitting there, which is not necessarily exactly what they want, but have exactly what they want more conveniently. The smartphone allows you to do that. The supply chain, that's in terms of how a Sweetgreen works with its farmers, as Nick talked about yesterday, obviously uses technology. So there is a technology aspect to this, but at the core, it's about food.
Well, most of the investment, though, has gone into like plant-based meat solutions and other things. You've done different. Your investments are somewhat different from those. And so what I always wonder is if it's really thinking, oh, there's this cool, groovy new technology, biotech or whatever that we can use to goose the food system or change the food system. And I think you all have in your packets, or you should have.
I noticed it's on everybody's share.
Steve's riff on Soylent. And so talk a little bit about why that Soylent in particular is not what you think of as a food investment.
Well, I should say, it is a food investment. I am, as I said before, with the rise of the rest, I'm a fan of any entrepreneur trying to do anything. I really am. I think that's how we move forward, and I want creating more opportunities for more entrepreneurs and more places and more sectors to take their ideas and kind of make them put them on the playing field and make them real is the key driver. And it is worth remembering. I remind people, because I live in Washington, D.C., that 250 years ago, America itself was just a startup. It was just an idea. It was. And now we're the leader of the free world. And some of that is because we've had a stable, most of the time, democracy for a couple centuries. But I think the principal reason is because we have the leading economy in the world. And the reason we have a leading economy is not an accident. It was entrepreneurs, first in the agricultural revolution and then in the industrial revolution, more recently the technology revolution, that pioneered a whole set of models and a whole set of businesses that basically took America from being this little startup to being the leader of the free world. So continuing to build on startups is critically important. I think what we're talking about here is sort of going a little bit back to the kind of where we were, because it's sort of a new agricultural revolution that now leverages technology in some interesting ways. But specifically on Soylent, it wasn't so much the product, which was a technology kind of powder, mix it with water, which I actually tasted. I personally thought it would taste like vanilla pancake mix, which I'm not sure I'd want to eat for every meal, but whatever. You know, it wasn't so much that. It was more the positioning of it as the reason you should buy this is because you're so busy coding, you really don't have time to eat. And you know, wouldn't it be better if people could just like get the nutrition they need, the calories they need in like a minute, so they have more time to like work.
And so
that's the part that kind of bugged me. And so it was so if they really were developing that product and offering it to communities that need it, or saying this is a great solution for Syrian refugees or something, good for them. But saying the reason this product should exist is because we all should work more coding and spend less time like chatting at the table with our friends and family, that just struck me as a Silicon Valley kind of just a little much.
Well, yeah, and this I thought of it as get rid of the pizza boxes that you see all over programming areas, right, and replace them with these little nifty bottles of everything you need in a chalk tasting.
And what I said also, that article, which I think is true, is that a great innovative technology company like Google actually has decided food is part of their culture. And as I'm sure you all know, they invest heavily in an amazing set of options, mostly pretty healthy options. And part of that is they want people to have access to that, but also they recognize it does create a camaraderie. It does allow people to bump into each other and kind of exchange ideas and so forth. I don't think you're going to see Google kind of close all their cafeterias and hand out packets.
Soylent. Well,
maybe I'm wrong. We'll see.
So, one thing I always remember that Will Rosenzweig, right, who's invested in food companies forever, he always says that there's one caveat when he thinks of VCs and entrepreneurial people getting involved in investing in food, which is, he always says, you just have to remember it takes 2 years to grow a cow to the size. It takes 2 months to build an app.
Right.
So is the VC community, do you think they really understand this, that it's kind of, you're not going to see the kind of explosive, you're not going to see 100 unicorns overnight in the food business?
Well, I think there are different folks there that have different views of what the food business are, and there have been some rapidly growing companies that are more technology app-centric, that Grubhub or things like that a lot of people do favor. But I agree with your point. I think and I think it's a broader point around the third wave of the internet. I think it's going to be the first wave, but the way I think about it was just building awareness of the internet, building the infrastructure, the networks, the software, the services, the content. So companies like AOL and Yahoo and Cisco and others kind of were the kind of leaders in that first wave. Call it 1985 to 2000 or so. The last 15 years, sort of the second wave, has been building on top of the internet. So it has been about the app economy and particularly around mobile phones. And a lot of great successful companies, Twitter and Facebook and et cetera, have kind of become the leaders of that second wave. I think the third wave is going to integrate the internet much more seamlessly and pervasively in every aspect of our lives. And in the process, disrupt food and education and health and transportation and energy and government services and financial services, big sectors of the economy that I think are ripe for a disruption, but it's going to require a different entrepreneurial mindset, which is around perseverance. These revolutions aren't going to happen overnight. The lesson I learned with AOL is that sometimes revolutions happen in an evolutionary way. So some patience, some perseverance is going to be important. You're going to have fewer overnight successes and more like AOL. People used to say, you came out of nowhere like an overnight success. No, we were a 10-year in the making overnight success. And for a lot of years in those 10 years, it wasn't working so well. I was getting calls from my parents saying, do you have a plan B? But eventually we broke. So perseverance is very important. Policy is very important, why I think conferences like this and having the secretary here is very important. That these sectors are regulated. They're going to continue to be regulated. The regulations maybe should change, and each sector is a little bit different. But people do want the government to protect them from certain things. They don't really want like a drone to fall into their kid's playground. They don't really want their kid to go to school and eat food that like makes them sick. So there is going to be a role for government. So the next sectors in the third wave that are going to be disrupted need to understand that, need to constructively engage with government, not just have this sort of like, I wish government would just close down so we could do everything we want, which sometimes you hear. And the third aspect is partnerships. I don't think this is going to be a go it alone game in the third wave. I think there's an African proverb that I love, which is you want to go quickly, you can go alone, but if you want to go far, you must go together. I think in the third wave, successful entrepreneurs are going to take this partnership mentality, understand the importance of policy, understand the importance of perseverance, and some investors will back those entrepreneurs, some won't. Some will say, no, I'd rather just stay in the second wave, work pretty well. I'm focused on kind of that. But I think there is more and more recognition. There's great opportunities, and more investors and more entrepreneurs are tackling some of these opportunities, which I think are great, not just in terms of building great businesses, but improving our lives in pretty fundamental ways.
That's cool. So I'm going to let you guys ask some questions now. Are there microphones? No pitches, please. Okay.
Hi.
I can't see very well. So.
You mentioned that one of the goals of impact in investing is to change some of the incumbents or put pressure on the incumbents to change. Who are the incumbents that you would most like to see change, and are they actually beginning to change right now? What would be some examples?
Well, I think in every sector we've looked at, and it certainly was true with the early days of AOL, that it's pretty clear who has the leadership position. And their challenge is how do you lean into generally how they think about it, how do you lean into the future, but you're actually more, if you're running one of those large companies, more about protecting the status quo. Not really, they actually would rather have it stay as is. So in the food sector, it is the big food companies, of which there are many, and they're beginning to adjust, they're beginning to recognize things are changing, but to be honest, it's hard for them. Not just in terms of culturally to figure out how to create that more nimble, kind of environment, but many companies who've tried to do this, PepsiCo, for example, with Indra Nooyi, was trying to push, and actually the investors who were taking a short-term view, in this case, kind of public investors, were saying, "Oh, you're going too fast. You're actually going to hurt the earnings in the short run because you're kind of, you have this kind of dreamy notion of kind of like healthier options." So actually, Pepsi got in trouble with their investors. So it requires the leadership of the CEO. It requires building a team within the company. It really requires building a network around the company so you have an understanding of what's happening, and that's why partnerships in this third wave are going to be so important, not just to the entrepreneurs, but to the large incumbents. And the ones that are smart about it will figure out the right kind of way, which is normally a balanced way to be kind of leaning into the future, but in a way that is respectful of its various constituencies and interacting more with entrepreneurs and not taking this, kind of hands off, hope this won't happen kind of view. But it won't happen overnight. These things, do take time. And I think you're beginning to see the industry recognize that the demographics are changing, the consumer preferences are changing. Some companies are emerging that really are, surprise people in terms of the traction they're getting. So they're definitely beginning to notice. Each of them have a different strategy in terms of what they're going to do in the next, 5 or 10 years. But there is an opportunity for everybody here to not just ignore them or diss them, but figure out a way to co-opt them, partner with them, and in a way that helps you, but also can help them, and ultimately helps all of us, because getting more innovation around some of these things is so important.
Great. So we've got... Sorry, I can't see well.
Oh, that's fine. I have a quick question. When I was first introduced to Soylent, I was introduced to it as not necessarily a meal replacement, but all of the nutrients and minerals and vitamins that we lack in our diet. And I'm curious what you propose. I know you're all about like Revolution Foods and trying to bring farm to table. But for the people that don't have time and the people that don't have money, the Soylent is so inexpensive. So do you...
No, I understand that, and that, as I said, that aspect of it I do respect. It was more the positioning of it that in terms of trying to deal with the busy programmers is really was their initial positioning. But figuring out innovative ways to provide more accessibility and more affordability are critically important. I hope there are people in this room that can do that beyond just powder in a bag you add water to. I think there are lots of different ways to provide kind of more affordability and more accessibility. And there are a lot of people, including some I've met while here, who are working on those models. I would be hopeful that collectively we can figure out a way to build on the Michael Pollan has been referenced many times, but sort of the real food, not too much, mostly plants dynamic, it seems like, and figuring out a way to make that more accessible and affordable to a larger audience of people. And that, frankly, was part of the reason we invested in Revolution Foods, because their focus is much healthier options for kids in school that are close to, usually 2 or 3% more expensive than the unhealthy option. If it was 20 or 30%, the schools wouldn't be able to afford it. So the real push there has been around affordability and accessibility so that healthier options can be available, to millions and millions, hopefully someday tens of millions of people. So I think it's critically important. And again, any innovation to take that on, go for it. But I'd be hopeful that the revolution in food will remember that some aspects of food is not just about the nutrients. There is a broader purpose of it that we need to understand and embrace and build on.
So one more. Anybody out there?
Thanks. I can assume by your investments in Revolution and Sweet Green implied sort of winners and losers in school food service and in restaurants. Do you see similar types of winners and losers in retail, which is an industry that's undergoing a lot of disruption right now? I'm seeing a lot of clear losers. I'm not sure I yet see who the clear winners are. I'd love your thoughts on what you see.
Well, if you know the clear winners, let me know, because I'd love to talk to them. But, no, I think my view is, and again, it's consistent with some of the things that have been discussed here, so there is a little bit of a preached and the converted aspect of this, but I think this revolution in food will be in all parts of the spectrum, in terms of how food is produced, how it's distributed, how it's consumed in different kind of locations and different ways and so forth. So I think there are opportunities in each of those, and I think we're only scratched the surface. And I just remind people that it goes back to my AOL story. This takes time. That I think that progress is being made. I think there is a growing recognition of the momentum, which is why there's conference like this that wouldn't have existed, say, 5 years ago. So there is a momentum. There's the beginnings of a network effect kicking in. It hasn't kicked in yet, hasn't hit a tipping point yet, but it will, I think, sooner rather than later. So in all the different challenges, opportunities you're focused on, I think taking that longer term view and really recognizing that it is a battle worth fighting, it is a revolution worth kind of instilling or encouraging, but some degree of patience and perseverance is required, some degree of respectful engagement with partners and policy is required, and if we collectively do that, I think we will wake up and have a different world. With AOL, it took us really 10 years, as I said. It was sort of the mid-90s where somehow everybody decided, internet should, I get it now, I want to be part of it. And that 10 years, there are a lot of blocking and tackling foundational work. Remember, most people, when we started, didn't have PCs. Only 30% of the people who had PCs had this thing called a modem. Because actually the PC manufacturers didn't think most people wanted a modem because they thought most people would use a computer to do like spreadsheets and word processing or store their recipes. So it took a while to get the PCs to be lower cost. It took a while to get the modems built in. The networks initially were $10 an hour. They needed to be pennies an hour. It just took a lot of work over a decade, and then finally things took off. And my belief in this space is going to be exactly like that. So the work that's happened, and many of you have been doing this for a while, the momentum is building. It's starting to accelerate, and if people kind of work together in the right kind of way, I think that tipping point could be sooner rather than later. But just as we said then that there needed to be modems and PCs, we fought to get the PC manufacturers to build modems. We just didn't wait. So some of this is figuring out what are the roadblocks, what are the impediments, and then figuring out a way to get them out of the way that will then unleash that next wave of innovation and growth.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for all you're doing.
Great to see you, Steve.